Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby City Council regular meeting for December 18th, 2019. Please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray to you this evening about this great city that we have, and I thank you so much for it. I thank you for the leaders that are gathered here this evening. I thank you just endless praise and thanks for the grace that you provide us. I do ask that in this time of celebration that you bless those that I know that we all know someone or a family or an individual that's going through some tough times. I just ask that you find ways for us to be a light in their life during this time of want, celebration, and that we as a community continue to come together and be the great community that we are and rally around those people during this time. I ask that you bless everyone in our community these next weeks as we close out the year and move into a new year. 2020 will definitely be a year of many changes and whatnot, and we just ask for your favor. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda this evening, communications. Mr. McClure, anything right now?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful. We will move into our first opportunity for citizen input and community announcements. This is an opportunity for those here that want to address the council on non-agenda items. Please fill out a lovely yellow card. Please take it to Melissa, our city recorder, and she'll make sure that we give you that opportunity to come and address the council. You have 3 minutes to address the council. If there's something that we can take care of or address this evening, we will. If not, I will work with city staff to get those answers or figure out what our next steps may be. The first yellow card that I have tonight is Miss Palmer wants to talk to us about the Heritage Landmark Commission and a public survey.
She brought stuff with her.
And she
That was right. I didn't know that.
mm-hmm.
I did not know that one.
Show and tell. Okay, am I on? Oh, I am. I'm on.
You are on.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, I have two things tonight, is the communication or the comprehensive preservation plan. And a really important part of that is public input. And so in front of you, coming around, are the surveys that we have posted online. Thank you, Melissa, for doing that so quickly. We have them in English and in Spanish. For people that are not that comfortable with taking a survey online, we've got paper copies at the Adult Center, the Canby Center, all of the typical places, the library and the chamber office. I think I mentioned English and Spanish. So what I would like to ask of you is to encourage all of your friends, family, strangers on the street, anybody you run into, to please go online and take the survey. If they're not comfortable, they could pick it up at the library or someplace like that. The end date for the survey is January 10th. That's when we'll gather the data. Our consulting firm will do the analysis for us, and then January 22nd is another day for the public to give input. We're going to have a public meeting in the library at the Willamette Room, 5:30 to 7. The consulting firm and the HLC will present the results of the survey at that point to anyone who's there, and it'll be a chance for people who want to have face-to-face conversations about it to give their input. Their input then from that day will also be incorporated in the final plan, so that's what you will see. And you're all invited as well. So. Then the second thing, and you can start passing that around, the 150th. I want to talk just a little bit about that. First of all, that seal that's in the left-hand corner of the survey, the city seal. Have you ever wondered where that came from, or whose idea it was, or how it came about? Well, I can tell you a little bit about that, if you're interested. In 1969, the city formed a Centennial Commission because they were planning for the 100th year anniversary of 1870, which is a major milestone in our community. And as part of that effort, they had a public contest, and they asked people to contribute ideas about what the theme of the centennial should be. There were judges, there were prizes. They selected Home of the Good Earth. Now, if you look really closely at the city seal, right in the middle of the city seal, you're going to see Home of the Good Earth. Little teeny writing. And at the same time, the commission decided they really wanted to have an emblem with the theme. So they turned to a fellow by the name of Gentry Cutsforth. And what you're looking at, the second piece of paper that's coming around, you should have, oh, you got it. That's what Gentry put together. And you'll notice that that is extremely similar to exactly what we have as a city seal today. So that's interesting to me as a historian, because looking back on 150 years ago, I think it's really obvious how the changes that took place at that time really changed the whole trajectory of the community. But it's also fun to look back at what happened 50 years ago and see how the community celebrated it, and to recognize that some of that celebration actually still reverberates with us today. And that is in the form of the city seal. And I'm sure we'll uncover many other things like that as well. Now, I have a confidential informant who has told me that the city is thinking about rebranding, and part of the rebranding could be, even a new city seal. So I personally think that doing that during the sesquicentennial year would be an absolutely fabulous thing to do, since this original seal was adopted during the centennial year. The only thing I would ask is that we don't kick the old seal to the curbside, but give it a respectful retirement and somehow preserve it. And that could be in a plaque, maybe with the story of the seal and how it came about, and also just to acknowledge the fact. I have one more thing for you, and I'll pass it around. And if it breaks, Nora Clark will never forgive me.
Yeah, no pressure,
So we'll
Councilor
start with
Verwey.
Sean. Yes, we'll start with Sean. Sure, here you go.
So those commissioners back in 1970 decided that one of the things they wanted to do was have lots of mementos. And so we had dishware. You could buy an entire set of dishes with the city emblem on it. And so there's just a few of those left. But by seeing that on that plate like that, you're looking at it as exactly as it was in 1970. It wasn't blue. The colors were gold and green. And it's really is sort of a treasure. There is one of those, if you go to the depot, you know, there's that table kind of in the entry area with the glass in it, and you look in there, you'll actually see a full set of the dishes. So, let's see, what have I forgotten? There is a meeting, January 14th. I think Jamie has sent out an email to every organization and individual that's involved in any kind of event planning between March and August. That's going to be the time frame for the 150th. So we're going to have that meeting at, again, in the Willamette Room to talk to those folks about implementing and the kinds of things we'll have available for them for the 150th. Hopefully things that they can adapt and integrate into their own events without doing new stuff, but just integrate the idea of the 150th. So, at the same time, we're working on the logo. We've got a graphic designer and the branding that we're going to use for the 150th. That's it for me.
Carol, the meeting about the survey, that was the 22nd?
22nd.
Okay, thank you. I
Yeah.
want to make sure I wrote it down right. Thank you.
Yes, also in the Willamette Room, and 7 o'clock on both of those meetings? Or?
No, the one with the organizing meeting on the 14th is 2:30, no, it's 2 to 3:30. It's folks like Kiwanis, Leader, you know, Chamber, those sorts of folks.
Okay. And the 22nd is?
5:30 to 7.
5:30 to 7.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Carol, once again, thank you for taking this on. I know, had a meeting with Jamie and Calvin, geez, now it must have been 2 months ago, and sat down and said, hey, you know, 150th, you know, anniversary of Canby, and they're like, Carol's already on it, we're already talking about it, we're already moving forward with things. And I went, perfect. So I appreciate all that you have done with the Historic Landmark Commission and just grabbing these things and running with it. So thank you so very much for all that you do. I really, really appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I could comment on the branding and the logo, the
Yeah.
confidential informant is correct. So she was right. We've been actually looking at that. And a key thing is that this is an amazing seal. It's great. As a graphic, it's almost unreadable from any kind of a distance, and so we had a discussion about maybe looking at something different. We evolved that discussion, and then we determined we're heavily branded with the garden spot, with the dahlia, with that, and so we said, why don't we just keep working on that? And then just recently, some people have commented they really like it overall, but they don't like the brown per se.
Right.
So we've actually got a new color scheme that has, I think, 5 or 6 colors you can use that actually tie in with that. So I think we're going to start evolving that direction. And then potentially, like if it's, say, the library, they could use that and then tuck library, lettering in that just to identify that department or a program. So that's
Excellent.
kind of where we're headed right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you. Councilor Parker?
Since we're on this subject,
Yes.
during my tenure as communications manager for Clackamas County, I did take the county logo, which had 49 discrete elements to it, including a sailing ship, wheat, oxen, and so on. We would often have contests to see how many of those you could name, and changed it to the Mount Hood with the C carved out. For the exact reason Scott's pointing out, is that it's sizable, that you get this one below a certain point and it's just a blob. Also, it doesn't have the ability to convert to different colors. So I'll trust our staff has the knowledge to put together a logo, but the modern thinking and modern meaning in the last 30 years is the simpler the better. So Godspeed.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure this one was even intended to be a seal. Somehow the city just adopted it, but I think it was intended to be a larger size because of all of the elements that are in there, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Oh, sorry, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Mayor, at the 100th anniversary, there was a lot of, and I'm not advocating you do this now. This is just something that I know happened, and those of you that can do math will know how I know that it happened. We involved the school kids quite a bit.
Yeah.
And they had a bit of a parade and some ceremonies and stuff for the centennial. And the kids were involved in, each class got to make its own seal and turn it in. Were you a part of that? I can't confirm
do
or deny
math?
that, although I have very vivid memories of it. So, and it's amazing how much what the kids did actually did turn out to be a lot like this. But, design elements get shared by little kids. So that's just something anecdotal. We did involve the kids, and it was kind of a special time. And it makes for some memorable moments. So I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying that's just kind of what happened
little seed.
50 years ago.
Thanks to the city scrapbooks, I got to spend some time going through the articles that the city had saved for.
Yeah.
And it was amazing what they did. The governor was here.
Yeah,
There
it
was
was a
at
big
least
deal.
2 parades. There was a queen, there was a bunch of princesses. Yeah, keys to the city, chaperones for the court. It was
a big deal.
Yeah. The picnic alone had 400 people came to the picnic.
Yeah, which was 10% of the town.
Yeah, it was just
It was.
amazing. So we've really used some of that, and what we want to do is share some of that with some of the businesses, because people like the Dahlia Festival, they developed a special dahlia
Yeah.
for the centennial, and so, it could be that the people that own the dahlia, the Swan Island now, don't know about that, but they could use it somehow to promote the sesquicentennial and their ties to Canby, so. Yeah, it's really been fun.
It was a fun time.
Great. Anything
Thank
else?
you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.
Stick around, Carol. I'm going to be mentioning you in counselor comments.
Okay.
If you don't want your ears burning, you should stick around.
Yeah, but I want my plate back.
And Melissa has it.
Melissa has it.
The most trustworthy person up there has it.
Next card I have is Gordon Christensen, but he's in the booth, so I will just let you all know. So in front of you was some photographs, and then there was an email sent out about some work that CTV5 has been working on, and they now have a booth created there at CTV5. If you want to create your own podcast or your own vlog, they have the capabilities to do all that. So definitely get in contact with Gordon Christensen and CTV5, and they will get you set up for training and how to use it. And their goal is to really create an opportunity in the community for creating content in that regard. So definitely reach out to them on that piece. So Gordon, hopefully I covered that well enough for you. So that's all that I have in terms of citizen input and community announcements. We'll move into mayor's business. Last night was the Park Advisory Board meeting. I was not able to attend as I was attending my son's band concert, but from the agenda, they had sounds like some great discussion on some further improvements to Maple Street Park that are having some discussion. They interviewed candidates for one open board position, which became two after one of the board members announced that they were resigning. So it looks like we'll be appointing potentially two new Parks Board members at our meeting in January. And then they had a discussion on updates to the Park Master Plan and the Willamette Wayside Master Plan. Keep them separate, put them together. So there's some dialogue regarding those going on, and hopefully we'll have more on that at the next meeting. Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, so C4. The last meeting, we had a discussion on the housing needs assessment recommendations. So we've asked staff to bring back pieces from the retreat that we had back in June regarding housing and how we want to maybe tackle some of these pieces that were coming out of the housing needs assessment and analysis. There was a housing needs task force that was created, and they came up with and created 7 action steps, or 7 steps to kind of like take back or recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners with approximately 19 different action items to take potentially. So they wanted to present that to the Board of County Commissioners before they bring that to C4 for conversation. That then led to a discussion on how C4 and the Board of County Commissioners can work together on the housing needs analysis and the assessment. And then the big piece, it became rather, we'll call it an impassioned conversation with myself and one of the other C4 members, because we wanted to make sure that if there's going to be a partnership between the coordinating committee and the Board of County Commissioners, that we don't have a repeat of 4 years ago when the C4 group spent years working on transportation plans, recommendations, funding mechanisms, just to have the Board of County Commissioners show up at a meeting and say, thanks, no thanks, we're going to go our own direction, which created a whole lot of unnecessary drama. But so really wanted to drive home the point with the commissioners that were there, that if it's going to be a partnership, that we don't have a repeat of that situation, because that would not be, I think that'd be really detrimental to what we're looking at in terms of housing. We had a conversation about the 2020 legislative session. So the short session's coming up here in February. Generally speaking, the short session at the legislature is for budget fixes and some policy pieces. Sounds like the docket's going to be already starting to be very full. So the C4, the coordinating committee, is asking that any conversations that cities may have with our legislators be about I-205 and finding the funding to do that expansion on the Abernathy Bridge and that stretch there through Oregon City to West Lynn. So that the funding is there. We've got design funded. Now it's just a matter of finding the money for construction. So that was a big ask from the coordinating committee. We had a conversation on T2020. That is the Metro transportation bond that they're looking to put forth and try to get passed here in, I believe, May of 2020. There was actually a meeting and vote this evening by the T2020 task force on the list of projects. So the mayors, myself, Mayor of Sandy, Molalla, and Estacada submitted a letter asking the task force to make sure that they understood that we're not in Metro. We definitely, with the amount of housing that we're going to be seeing in Clackamas County, we've discussed here, and our planning director's here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we have about 600 plotted homes for us. Estacada's looking at 1,000. Sandy's looking at about the same. Molala's in a little bit of a different conversation right now, but our point being that to address some of the housing pieces, that's going to end up on the rural side of Clackamas County, but then there's no transportation to support that. So the projects like the Sunrise Corridor, the Clackamas to Columbia, McLaughlin, and then 82nd all support the growth, or support some of the growth in Clackamas County that's coming up, and transportation pieces. So I think I reported last meeting that we've seen some movement with those projects getting moved up the list. So the four mayors, myself and the others, felt it was imperative that we submit a letter to the task force just outlining, letting them know, hey, this is what's going on, and how we think those projects can benefit Clackamas County and therefore the metro area. This afternoon, Clackamas County Economic Development with the Clackamas Business Alliance hosted an event called Grow Clackamas County. And for the event, they featured Canby's very own ICC Northwest, ICC Northwest used to be JV Northwest. And the reason for their recognition and highlight was that part of so ICC is a company based out of the Midwest, and they came in and worked out a purchase of JV Northwest, and then in that purchase kept JV Northwest here and actually rehired or maintained the 100 or so employees that they had, and then hired back everyone that was laid off. And then ICC Northwest recently received a $200,000 strategic reverse fund loan from the governor's office, which will enable them to expand operations here in Oregon, versus there was talk of them possibly relocating out of Oregon. And so this actually allows them to stay here and expand. They'll be adding another warehouse and manufacturing center in Tualatin and add an additional 60 jobs. So they were being highlighted, so I just wanted to congratulate them on that recognition. And then finally, I just want to thank our city team, our economic development team, and then our parks team for an incredibly successful Light Up the Night event. If you missed it, the lights are still on. Go down and check it out. But I think we factored in there was probably almost 4,000 people in our downtown for the event. And our parks team spent a month putting up lights, going through, I think, 2,000 feet of lights to repair squirrel damage to make the event happen. So I wanted to thank them for really doing a great job in our downtown. So I want to thank them. So
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
The day after that, a strand of lights around the tree went out.
I heard that.
I just want to congratulate them on how fast they got that back up. My kids noticed it, and they noticed even faster how quick they came back on, and they were very excited that the tree wasn't going to be burnt out for all of Christmas. So,
yeah, I was talking with Jeff, who's our park lead, and he said that they actually found the squirrel nest in the tree, and that it was made up strictly of the wiring casing, the plastic casing of all the wires. So they found the culprit. I suspect they moved him out.
This is a little Griswold-like.
It is very Griswold-like. It wouldn't be Christmas in Canby without squirrels and light damage.
Griswold
So,
things, yes.
yes, so there we go. We'll move into councilor comments, liaison reports. Councilor Berge.
So the Planning Commission, looks like we're going to be voting tonight to fill the last open seat, which is great, saying, when I look down through all the other committees and stuff, I see a lot of openings. So I'd like to thank everybody for stepping up and filling those positions, and we've got lots more open, so.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Parker?
Yes, hi there. Well, I've only got one, and it's a good one. That the Bike Committee submitted a $35,000 grant request to the Clackamas County Tourism Agency to do some additional research and development on their goal of having a bike lane going from Canby out to Malala. And they were awarded the full amount. Full $35,000 has been awarded. And credit goes to Mindy Monacuco for her leadership on the Bike Committee of saying, let's just do this. And with inspiration from Carol Palmer, who is now Canby's #1 grant getter. I think you've had 12 out of 13.
Oh, my.
And I think you helped a little bit with this one too. So thank you. And also to Calvin Lesueur, our staff. Calvin's been really helpful. Scott, what I would like from your end of things is to now make sure that we've got coordination between the Bike Committee and the Park Committee, that this falls between the two jurisdictions. Strategically, I think it made sense of trying to get money out of the tourism fund by going from the bike angle. That I think that they played a pretty good card there of saying that this can have a regional tourism effect by using bicycling. But we do need to coordinate this with existing plans that the Parks Committee has already been doing. So I'll count on you to make sure that coordination takes place. And that's it for tonight.
Great. Thank you, sir. Councilor Hensley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Traffic Safety Commission, we have 3 applicants for the opening on the commission, and so we meaning Chair Coleman and I will be meeting with those candidates on Friday morning and doing some interviews. So we'll be probably at the first meeting that we have in January, we'll be appointing a new commissioner. That's all I have for official liaison reports. My unofficial liaison report for Canby Suicide Prevention Task Force. We've been working on some things. We just wrapped up filming with several community members. And I think Gordon, except he's in the booth right now, when he's not in the booth, he's editing that into a PSA that should be airing shortly. So I'm excited to see that. They're doing a lot of great things down there at CTV5, so I was glad to see that email today and exciting news about that podcast room. And to elaborate just a moment on your invocation, I just want to say you're absolutely right. This community is amazing. I'm not going to name names because I'll forget somebody, but there are angels among us, and I just want to wish everybody Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Council President Dale.
Yes, sir. With Canby Utility, on behalf of the Utility Board, I want to confirm that squirrels love electric lines. It doesn't matter if they're LED Christmas lights or 57K feeder lines. They love them, as we find out here in the summer. I attended the Canby Utility Board's annual awards banquet, and we had some marvelous longevity awards and public service awards. Just a really great crew of men and women that keep the lights on and the water flowing, and my appreciation to them for inviting me to the banquet. Also attended the city staff breakfast. Thank you for inviting me. I got to sit with the Public Works guys. It was great. My breakfast was, you'll be proud of me, Mr. Mayor, entirely keto.
Oh.
Until I put Ken's gravy on it, and then it's gone. But it was really wonderful. Sat with the Public Works guys. Great, just Scott, such a great group of folks. And thanks for inviting me over. And we talked about everything from slurry sealing to computer languages that kids should be learning. So that was really good. Speaking of board vacancies, Canby Utility does have a board vacancy coming up to be filled in February. If you're interested in applying, please do. We don't want to let a board seat go vacant. Canby Utility has a very small board. There's only 5 of them in total. So a vacant seat really kind of smarts. Mm-hmm. So you can go to the city website and and get your application in there. We also have a couple vacancies for the Budget Committee. There's one for the city, and then there's actually 2 for the urban renewal budget. And if you're interested, please likewise get your application in there. We do have an applicant has turned in. If you are that applicant, don't despair. You haven't been ignored. The mayor and finance director and the board chair will be interviewing you pretty soon here with the turn of the new year. But if you're interested, please get those in to Melissa, and we'll get rolling. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Scott, thank you for the breakfast the other day. I got a lot of phone calls actually from city staffs just saying thank you they were thanking me, and I don't have a whole lot of say and control over that event coming together, so thank you for you and Julie, and Melissa putting heads together to figure out how to make that happen. It was great. It was fun. I mean,
Sorry to miss it. I had to work.
it was fun just to be able to have I think everybody was there except a couple of police officers, so thank you for making that happen. I know that was kind of touch and go as to whether or not that was going to happen, so thank you for doing that. And Tim, I think it's mind over matter. The gravy could still be keto if you truly believe that it's
I told myself that it was keto.
There you go.
That it was
There you
keto safe.
There you go. Perfect.
But it was really good.
It was.
It was amazing.
I really enjoy my keto Snickers bars.
Councilor Varney, what do you have for us tonight?
Not a whole lot. The fire board is meeting as we speak. Their meeting is normally on the 4th Wednesday of the month, which happens to be Christmas, and we couldn't talk anybody into meeting next week, so they moved it up to tonight, so I have nothing for there. Library continues to, the priority continues to be our service boundary, and that's kind of a big topic that we continue to work on. We've talked about it the last several months, still pushing through on that. The library is working on some wording for a petition to be signed, to be sent out. So I don't have a whole lot of details on that. I was absent from the meeting last night because we have a sick family. So if you hear my sniffles, it's because we're trying to get over stuff. I know there is a meeting this week with our administrator as well as the Oregon City administrator. So hopefully we get a little bit of movement there. So that's about all that I have.
Appreciate you updating on this. Please let us know, or let me know what we can do to keep helping push that along. I thank you for taking that meeting with Oregon City. I'm not sure what will come of it other than a meeting was had, but at least it's a start. So in that regard, so yeah, let us.
I think
keep
even
on.
small steps forward are better than any steps backwards. So I think it's good. So
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great. We'll move into the consent agenda this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the minutes of the December 4th, 2019 City Council meeting and approve the appointment of Michael Hutchinson to the Planning Commission.
And second?
Motion has been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve the consent agenda, which include the adoption of the minutes of the December 4th, 2019 City Council meeting and approve the appointment of Michael Hutchinson to the Planning Commission. Any questions or comments? None? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. Great. We'll move into our resolution this evening. Mr. Brown, you're tackling this one for us tonight?
Thank you, Mayor Hudson. We have a transfer of road authority to discuss tonight. It's presented by a board order from the county commissioners. I did get a copy of that that's been filed with the county now. It was order number 2019-96 that basically is an offer to surrender jurisdiction of a rather modest portion of North Maple Street, which is on this slide there that you can see. It's 50 foot of right-of-way, 490 feet, and it's in a section of the road that is entirely within the city limits of Canby, but it is the county's authority, as is the rest of that portion of North Maple that is south towards Territorial. and then the remainder of North Maple from this segment north towards the end terminus, where the 7-acre subdivision is proposed, is already in city jurisdiction. And part of the reason for this was there's actually two things that have happened. Is there's been a lot of citizen concern about the portion that's county-owned towards Territorial Road. And so they were asking that we take over the entire distance from Territorial north. And rather than do that at this time, there's been more of a concerted effort here recently that Jerry Nelzine and such has been talking with the county to better prioritize citywide what roads do we have, which are most important, and so that we can get a better handle as we move forward in possible future transitions. At the same time period, as most of you know, we were in the process of approving the 7-acre subdivision at the terminus of North Maple. And in that long, arduous process, the condition of approval of that subdivision, now that it is moving forward and all the appeals are over with, the first condition of approval was to make improvements that they volunteered to make, which includes this section and some of the road between the subdivision and this section, that they're slightly widening the road to a minimum fire safety hazard, and they're also adding a parallel bike path, pedestrian pathway that's separated from the road that would be 5 foot wide. And those improvements can be facilitated. Staff was talking with the county, with the developer, from a pre-construction meeting that was held, everybody in attendance, to discuss the widening of that road. And it was agreed among all the staff and the developer that it would be preferable if the permitting and the review of that road improvement was under one jurisdiction rather than two. So the county agreed to that. They passed this order offering to surrender it. It did need to be approved by the city within 90 days or it expires. And since they did that on December 5th, we jumped right on it and we brought something before you to see whether you were interested in helping with the improving of efficiencies for maintenance and public services that we think would be offered by taking over this modest section of roadway. We did point out in the staff report that you're probably aware that as we try to take over these streets, we first check on our intergovernmental agreement as to whether they would provide us the equivalent of a 2-inch asphalt overlay. They actually declined in this case, citing that the road actually is, although it's not the right width, it's actually in good condition, and the fact that the developer was conditioned to widen the road, they didn't feel like this was a good one for them to provide that extra incentive. So that's the only thing we're really missing with this particular segment. So both the county staff and the city, and I'm quite sure the developer as well, is recommending that we take over this section of the road. Is there any questions?
Has there been a pavement condition index done on this stretch of road at all?
Well, they went out and checked it, and that's all I'm going by at this point.
It's just theirs.
Since it's not our section of road, I don't know whether our pavement analysis that Jerry has would have addressed this, since it's a county road. So we had to use what they indicated.
Yeah, reading the staff report, Brian, of course, the whole piece about the county not wanting to put any money towards it because whatever, it's in good shape or whatever, that just is their position still on some of these things, which irritates me to no end, because we're going to have to then figure that out on our end to get that up to snuff at some point along there. So,
I didn't want you to be blind to that, so I put it in the report and let you know, but we made our effort.
I appreciate that. I'd rather know it now than later, so. Other comments or questions for Mr. Brown? Yes, Councilor Parker?
I've got a comment, but we can go ahead and vote on the motion, and I'll make the comment afterwards.
Okay, is it relevant to the vote, or?
No.
Okay,
It's relevant to something you mentioned about Jerry's list.
gotcha.
Yeah, quickie. So Scott, obviously you're behind bringing the recommendation to us. You forwarded it to us. I'm just interested in your take on, what's our exposure? Is this kind of one of those, hey, the developer's gonna bring it up to standard anyway, we might as well take it, or are we inheriting some risk and dollar obligation?
I think we're safe on this one.
Okay.
And it's logical. We do have the developer doing the main work. Yes, will there be routine maintenance, but, here's the road segment. So in the grand, system, we're fine.
Yeah, so the main advantage to us is we are gonna get decent asphalt, and the permitting's all under our jurisdiction.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, my questions are kind of the same, so if you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. I'll make a motion. I move to approve resolution number 1329, a resolution accepting Clackamas County's board order offering to surrender jurisdiction of a portion of North Maple Street being approximately 490 linear feet in length and 50 feet in width, lying between Northeast Maple Court and Northeast 23rd Avenue, County Road number 2579, between milepost 0.00 and milepost 0.09, located entirely within the city of Canby corporate city limits.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is made by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Council President Dale to approve Resolution 1329, a resolution accepting Clackamas County's board order offering to surrender jurisdiction of a portion of North Maple Street, being approximately 490 linear feet in length and 50 feet in width, lying between Northeast Maple Court and Northeast 23rd Avenue, which is County Road number 2579, between milepoint 0.00 and milepoint 0.09, located entirely within the Canby corporate city limits. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Councilor Parker, do you have a question before he leaves?
Just bouncing off of his comment about Jerry's list of things that, putting together a list of priorities. I'd encourage, when you and Scott get together and talk about future work sessions, that we consider a holistic work session on roads, priorities, and our maintenance list. When I talk to citizens of Canby, the most frequent discussion is, when is this road going to be fixed? When is that road going to be fixed? And frankly, my memory is getting a little rusty on our strategy with bringing roads in from the county, and in what order. That's one. Two, what is our street maintenance priorities over the next couple of years? I'd be interested in knowing that. I'm not sure there's a particular policy issue on that, but I just think from us being informed on where staff needs to go would help us better communicate with our constituents. As people come up to us and they say, well, this road's in crappy shape, I can say, well, in 2 years, 3 years, whatever, that it's going to be addressed. And I just think it would be a worthwhile session for us to sit down, see what staff considers to be what the priorities are, and even just a briefing on what next year's maintenance are. Usually we don't receive those until May or June from the city administrator saying, here's the list of what we're doing. But I think it would be helpful to have a holistic review of that, if you would give that some consideration.
No, definitely. So a couple months ago, I spent a day with Jerry prior, kind of in between last city manager leaving and Scott starting, and we basically drove the whole city and looked at all the projects that Public Works was working on and had a conversation about roads, and Jerry said that one of the things he's working on in now is working with Scott, and Scott, please color in anything that I might be missing, was looking at the road maintenance pieces that we have still, where we're at overall. And then the road additions that we're looking at with South Ivy, county roads, the Walnut Street connection, and how does that all like play out, and then how do we pay for those? So looking at the straight maintenance fee and where we're at with generating revenue on that piece, and then now with the vehicle registration fee money coming in from the county, their portion that we get as part of that, how do we want to use those funds, or what his recommendation is going to be? So we may actually have some policy pieces that we're going to have to look at, but I know, Scott, am I leaving anything out in that conversation?
No, that's good, yeah, because the whole idea is, I think the main thing to remember is that we have different pots of money that are used for different things.
Right.
And that's one that's hard for citizens to figure out sometimes. And an example could be like Maple that we just did, where, the asphalt was maintenance, but then the sidewalks, that was using gas tax or other sources of funding.
Right.
In that case, if you added a layer, let's say you would have added a turn pocket, you don't need one on Maple, but as an example, that could have been SDC eligible. So those are those layers that we need. So I think what you need to do typically, what I've done in prior places, is you lay your projects out in just a matrix. Here's the projects, here's the funding sources, where they're coming for us, and you kind of work things through. And sometimes there's some options to move things around, and just try to make the best list out of it.
You just said matrix, and I felt him quiver.
I got excited. Actually, Mary, you do raise a good point, that there is a policy discussion that I would like to have. I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose it, because this council has never been fond of debt, although I think I can make a very conservative argument to do what the city of Sandy is doing with its vehicle tax registration, which is to use that income stream to bond and do all of their road works in 2 years. My argument would be, yes, we are going into debt, but I don't think asphalt's going to get any cheaper, and buying it in 2021 dollars may be cheaper than buying it in 2030. But I would at least like to have the discussion on whether the council, to make an affirmative decision one way or the other, of whether we want to use that revenue stream to go out and bond and get all of the roads done that need to be done, or just dink along every year. That's one. Two, I would like another discussion and clarification on our policy of bringing county roads into the city. I've been following this, I guess, as much as anybody, and I'm still not exactly sure. That I think the idea was one of incrementalism, that we would bring them in as we could or when we needed to. But I would like to get a full list of the streets that are county roads, what sort of shape they're in, how well they're traveled, and what the priority would be to bring those in and bring them up to city standards.
Yeah, so on that front, I know that as part of the vehicle registration fee, and that's where that project, so it's an interesting conversation, because we seem to be the city that has the most county roads in Clackamas County.
I think was it the 13 cities?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so,
There's
right, sorry,
many
county
cities
roads
that we
within
have
their
the
city
most.
limits. And so, when they were laying out the project list recently of projects that they're looking to tackle with the vehicle registration fee dollars from the county side, turning those streets over to us was like fourth on the list. So, and what they're looking at would be, unfortunately, it's not any kind of a rebuild situation. It would be like, great, what's it going to cost to do asphalt by asphalt? And great, here's a check, go forth and conquer, take them over from us and apply the money how you see fit. So that's part of that piece, and I think that goes into the matrix conversation that Jerry's trying to put together right now.
And I think being good stewards of the city and looking towards the future of the growth of this city is us investing enough in the city streets to handle the increased transportation demands that an increased population is going to have.
True.
And not playing cheap and saying, well, as some people tell me, if our roads are crappy enough, people won't move here. No, that's not going to happen. We're just going to have more people with more crappy roads.
We'll keep Millars and Les Schwab busy with tire alignments and new tires. So, yeah, I've got that noted. Scott and I will work on that with Jerry to get that, keep that going forward. Anything else for Mr. Brown while he's here?
Nope.
No?
Good night,
Brian,
Mr.
thank you. Merry Christmas, sir. Moving into new business, the Canby Park and Recreation Advisory Board recommendation and update. Mr. Chair Treebwasser, hello, sir, how are you?
Good evening. Hello, everybody. We did submit a recommendation to the City Council with the, in your packet. And tonight with us, we have Don Morgan and Andrew Hale from the Canby Area Park and Recreation District, which are trying to shrink their district from the school district down to the size of something smaller, the city limits, the urban growth boundary, transit district, one of the smaller districts that they think they could then pass a tax base and then provide recreational services. And so the recommendation from the Park and Rec Committee was that we would like the City Council to say that they would support that and write a letter to the county so they would hopefully move forward. One of the consequences of that is after, if it is passed and the county says, yes, you can shrink the district, before they could go out to pass a tax base, there would have to be some type of an agreement between the city and the recreation district so that they would each know who's going to do what and be able to tell the voters, okay, if you've passed the bond measure, this is what we can provide. They can't do that if we don't have an agreement with the city because we both can't go out and compete against each other
Right.
with recreational services.
So, thank you for the letter. You guys have been recommendation heavy, and we appreciate it. I appreciate
We
it.
have, I think we're going to try to do one a month.
Okay, no,
I like it.
no, it's good.
Let's hear from you.
I will say, so this past weekend, I sat down with Barry Johnson from the Park Board, and we did have conversation about just the whole Capward shrinking of the district and where does that play in with all the other park pieces that we've been talking about the last couple of months or years, depending on who you talk to. And so the big thing that Barry and I were discussing was we need to get these queued up in timelines. So one of the things that we worked on was what are the different parks pieces that we need to make, we being either the city council, make some decisions on, or in conjunction with, you know, whether that be a work session with the Park Advisory Board, and in this case, Capward as well, getting together and figuring out, okay, what's the end game and what's that? So Scott and I will work on that list of, I have the list, because Barry and I came up with it, but in terms of timelines of dates. So just like, like discussing Capward, discussing the Willamette Wayside, you know, where, are we, what can we do, what we can't do. We need a history lesson for the council on Willamette Wayside, we need a history lesson on Capward, those pieces for us to talk about, but get those queued up so we know that when those conversations can occur, and a lot of that I think is going to depend on city staff and bandwidth in the planning department to be able to start working on those pieces.
We
So,
began that discussion last night.
great, so
And,
we will get that queued up, because I know there's a lot of dialogue on the council here about how all these could play together, and what does that mean if, like you said, the IGA piece, what does that look like? And our city manager, one of his fortes and passions is parks, so he'll definitely,
We might ask Andy and Don exactly how soon do you think that you're going to be ready to go to the county with your proposal?
Well, we've already gone to the county
Yeah.
with the proposal, and they would prefer to have a letter of recommendation from them.
Don, you want to come up to the microphone there? I know. This is what happens when you get to be the historian of the board, of that particular board, Don.
I didn't volunteer for that either.
You have to catch Mr. Hale up so he can take it over, right?
We've taken a petition to the county last April,
Yeah.
somewhere in that time frame, and met with Martha Schrader and one of the county attorneys, and then Jim Bernard. And they would have liked to see a recommendation from Canby City Council, along with the Park and Recreation Advisory Board, recommending the shrinkage of the district before they move on. And at the same time, they were in kind of a little war with Happy Valley, North Clackamas Park District, and Happy Valley.
Just a little one.
Yeah. And they didn't want to move ahead on anything right then without setting a precedent and that, so the politics were in there. But we didn't really want to move ahead without, we would really like to have your guys' okay on it too. It's the Cappard, Blue Heron, whatever it was before that, has been in existence since middle 60s when it was first formed. And it's never been funded, and been, I don't know, I'm thinking it's 5 or 6 different elections to try and fund it, always been shot down pretty much by the same percentage points. People in the county outside the city limits say no. People in the city, pretty much, they're a lot more in favor of it. What it needs then, if this was to pass, is then everybody come together and come up with a real good plan that you could take to the voters to set up to try and get a tax base passed. A little one, you could work whatever, that's the details, but you aren't going to get anywhere, in our opinion, until you reduce the size of the district. One hang up too is the county, well, part of the requirements of it is that you need a description of what the boundaries will be, which would be the city of Canby. And actually, you guys don't have a description of the city limits. Last one was 1969, I believe, we came up with. And so
Joe will make something up for you.
details, but that was one of the things that county planning and the attorney said that's something you will need at the time too when you do shrink it. So it's kind of where we sit. We've taken the petition to them. They've kind of said, no, this is what we'd like before we can do anything with it.
Yeah, and I appreciate, I'm glad that at least we've had a meeting of the minds on these two groups, because I think that there's got to be that relationship, and like you said, it's one or the other, like we've talked about, and I was sharing with Councilor Parker today, you get confusion when you've got city parks, and then you throw in a park district on top of it, and how, which one's which, and we talk about confusion with, our constituents about.
People out in the county would say, hey, we got county parks too.
Right.
So you got 3 different entities. They don't get the message, and without having a good message, you're not going to get anything passed.
Yeah, we're piling up a lot of meetings between you and Scott, and then also us with work sessions, but I think, from my standpoint, the key to this really is a unanimous feeling of what our outcome is. One of your board members, Scott Sassy, and I were talking just yesterday over how ironic it is that the city of Canby has a parks program, but not a recreation program, but we have a committee that's park and recreation. So we do not even have an internal consistency on what we are. From my own standpoint, I believe that the mental health, in addition to the physical health of a community, is dependent upon recreational opportunities. Some of the programs that the library is now doing are identical to what some park and recreation programs do, some of what the adult center does. So we've got these disparate things that are operating out of, and what I was talking to the mayor today about was agreeing upon an outcome and then deciding what is the vehicle to get there. And one of the vehicles could be Capper, but all of us need to get in a room and say, what is the ideal situation? What do we do with the aquatic center? Do we keep that on or off that's 5-year levy, or do we roll that in? Does the city lose control of its ability if in fact the Parks Department is turned over to a district? Who then puts on the light the night? Do we do that, or does some other entity? So these are questions that I think once we come to a unanimous agreement, we can go out to voters and say, here, all of us agree to this sort of thing. I think it was my first year on the council when I had a Cappert board come to me, and it was a divided board among themselves on what they were presenting, and I was baffled about that. I'd never seen that happen before, and that I think is part of the political baggage that we're dealing with. But I'm ready to push all that aside and say, just like roads, we've got a growing community. Our commitment is to the future and building programs and structures that are going to provide the services. I quote Councillor Dale, that we have services that need to be performed or that we choose to be performed, and we get to select how those services are provided. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the city, a district, it could be a number of things. But first, let's decide what we want, whether we do want to have recreation programs, whether we want to have something consolidated or not. And then we can come up with the avenue, the method, the structure.
That's been beaten around, yeah, well, a little bit of history in the 12 or 16 years I've been on Cappard. We've never worked with the city before.
And this is a good meeting right here.
You know, that's something that has to happen. You gotta be unified. You gotta work together to get anything to happen. But we've gone back to the boards, our board. We're unanimous that nothing's gonna happen unless the district shrinks. And that's the first step before you can move on anywhere. And that's what we're asking for, is a recommendation from you guys that shrink the district, that we can go to the county commissioners with.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Is there anything else, Mr. Treebwasser?
I think that's it for tonight. We had a lot of discussion last night that we'll save for next month.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you next month.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Scott, yes.
Procedural, so I think the key thing is we pass a resolution supporting the district, that's just what we're saying, is that we're okay with them having that discussion. There'll be more that will come behind that. Talk to Joe, and we think the best way to do this is actually a resolution, because it's a very formal action, looking at another governmental entity going to the county. So if you are supportive, we will develop a resolution, then bring that back at the next meeting for you to approve.
So you think that's, so help me tee this up then, Scott. I mean, not that I understand that being the next step to do that. Is there anything we need to do before that? I mean, I'm thinking, with Councilor Berge being new, Councilor Varway, Councilor Spoon, there's a lot of history with Cappard in terms of understanding that side of it. I don't know. I think I'd ask you two guys in terms of, like, what would you be, are you in a position now to support a resolution of shrinking a park district that you know?
Shrinking something you don't even know.
Well, yeah, there is some confusion on how it all works together, and because I don't have the history of it. I'd be in support of shrinking it, but I would want that to be followed up with a lot of discussion on how.
Sure. What does that mean?
Right. What does that mean? How do we work together? How do we make the Cappard work?
Back to Councilor Parker's point of, like, what's the end game result here that we want to try to achieve?
But if we know, and their recommendation is, and Cappard believes that there's no way they'll ever get funding if we don't shrink it, then that seems like the logical next step.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it is. There's a lot of history with Cappard, like as Don said. I mean, 5 or 6 times they've gone out to ask for something and voters have said no. I mean, we joke when we've sat down, the extent of the work and heavy lifting that they've done has been a name change 3 times, and so there's that piece. There was a period of time where there was conversation of Cappard going away entirely, and so is that sentiment still the case? I don't think so.
Basically, there was no framework for what were they going to do, or how were they going to do it, and who was going to be responsible.
Right.
So if you don't have that, they can't.
No, totally. Councilor Berge?
Yeah, and from my standpoint, I completely understand what you guys are saying, but with my knowledge and background in it, I have zero understanding of the entire scope. So there's no way I could support a resolution right now, but by you guys bringing this to us, I can start digging in. We can get some information in front of, there's a few of us that are new that don't have the background in that, and we can educate ourselves, and that way we can put together an educated decision with it.
The original district was the South Clackamas Recreation District, and it was formed just a couple years after the North Clackamas Recreation District was formed. And you know what the North Clackamas Recreation District is. It's huge, aquatic centers,
Right.
all kinds of things. So they had to say, okay, that's for the north side of the county. We want something to the south side. And that's where it came from. And then it became Blue Heron, and then it
it's
became
Catbird.
Catbird.
Yeah.
Would it make sense for us to have an exec session and discuss the
Well, I don't think it's
kind of
exec session
or-
material, but
It's
it'd be
not
work
exec, it
session.
would be work session.
That's what I meant, work session.
Gotcha.
That would be my preference.
Yeah, so let's have a work
Because-
session before we have a resolution so that we can kind of talk through everything. It's a kind of
Because
bring us up to speed.
if there are certain immutables on one side or another, for example, I think at one point there had been discussion about a Capert funding measure that would also take over the aquatic center here in town.
That was one ballot measure.
Yeah, and I'd need to have a binary decision on that before supporting shrinking the boundaries, because I don't want to go there. That we have never had a problem with a political lift on getting voter approval on that levy. And I think that's.
It's a levy versus a permanent
And,
tax.
and it is a public vote in support of a tax. And I wouldn't want to jeopardize that by putting the operation of that city facility into an unknown. So that's one thing. Also some jurisdictional issues and that sort of thing. Again, getting back to, let's have some common goals. I'm willing to go down this road of whether Capert might be one of the vehicles, but I've got some questions that really need to involve a dialogue back and forth on what does this mean? Practical things. Like right now, if we have a problem at Light the Night, it's city, I call Scott calls Jerry, and it gets done. But if it's an independent district, then we have a city program that's operated by a district. These are things that I'd kind of like to work out, like I told Brian when it came to the Ackerman project. If we get to know, let's get to know early. If there's not a no, then I'm okay pursuing this. But I really want to have a work session before I say, let's even take the first step, which is endorsing a shrinking of the district. Because I think, because of the way I perceive voters looking at our actions, that would be an endorsement of a district. Even though with us, it's a procedural movement to ask the county to allow this to have a place, I still think out there in the ether, it would come across as we endorse this, and then that becomes the issue.
Well, that saying knowledge is power. I think that before supporting a resolution, I do think that we need to have a little more knowledge over the entire situation. So I definitely support a work session prior to a resolution. So that's what I would love to see.
Okay. We will calendar that.
Need any more directions, Scott?
All right. Great. Great dialogue. Thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Thanks you guys for coming. Next up under new business is the associate planner position. Mr. McClure, I believe you're tackling that one.
Yes, thank you.
Is this unnecessary overreach of government?
Well, you would hope, so. Yeah, so the item here is actually we're requesting an additional position in the planning department. And just background, we have 3 staff in there right now. At present, they're barely keeping up with applications. Conscious decisions were made that was the direction for like the current budget year, which means that there's absolutely no planning activities going on otherwise. So not looking at transportation, parks, housing issues, what's going on. And the one that really concerns me in this area, this is the type when you're growing fast, that's when you need to be keeping your eye on those things, because you could miss something right now that then affects the community down the road.
Right.
And I'd prefer to be in one of those places where people 10 years from now don't look at us and say bad things at a basic level. So kind of going through just, I think we've talked a little bit, you mentioned housing, so we've got multiple industrial projects coming that are in process. Those are very complicated. Housing, about 450 in 2 years, probably another 200 behind that. And it's very difficult right now. They're having trouble keeping up with just basic customer service, let alone getting to those other items. So what we would like to do is we would like to arrest that and go a different direction where it can actually stay on top of things. Key thing is first is development. Development services being really good at customer service. People need information. They need correct information. They need us to be thorough on the front end so they can get their projects done. That's job one. The second side is, as we had park discussions, park master plan, we could actually get that off the shelf. We can look better at our housing needs, things that we're seeing, and then the other layer to always remember is the state's breathing down our necks on things that are required too that you really can't avoid. So we would like to get those things done, get ourselves back in a better position. Interesting one here, fiscal impact, because obviously, yes, it's a new position, that costs money. In this case, the planning fees that are coming in, because we're growing so fast, we could fund this position easily for at least a year and a half just on the overage in money, knowing probably that coming into the next fiscal year, we're going to be on the high side on revenues too. And so I think we're in good shape being able to fund this position and just layer back as a backstop. The city has made good financial decisions in the past, so we're in a good shape in the general fund as it is. Not plush by any means, but we're okay. And so if at some point needed to look that direction, just, general fund contribution, I think we'd be fine there too.
Yeah, Scott, I appreciate that, because I know when we talked about it, that was the big pieces was, we talked about the customer service front, we also talked about just workload, right? And it's a lot and it has been for our planning department, and then the financial impact to the budget and general fund kinds of stuff. And so the fact that we're generating enough business through the planning department to pay for it is good, so we're not feeling that drain on our budget. And this is a position we've been talking about, Council President Dale and I, with you coming on board, as we looked at position needs within the city, this was one of the first positions that we felt needed to be filled was in the planning department. So,
right. Yeah, and I think just to reiterate at one point, there's always, any department in the city, we could add staff. That's easy.
Sure.
There's needs everywhere. There's level of service, and then we need to be getting things done so we keep the community going the right direction. And that's what I'm looking at here. These are project-based, they're decision points. There's really looking with our eye to the future. And I like keeping an eye right here, but also mid and also out too, so.
Correct. Councilor Parker, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Brian and I talked about this earlier, and I don't think either one of us could quite remember the budgeting structure for this. I may be confusing this way Clackamas County Building Department operates, which is that the fees that it charges for development activity goes into a development fund. Is that true with us?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a closed fund
It goes
here.
into the general fund.
Yes.
So it is a hit out of the general fund, but it is paid for by our development activity. Well, I am totally in support of this for a completely different reason, which is that I think we've got an outstanding planning staff right now. I have been very impressed by everything I've seen, and I don't want them burnt out. And all the other things you're talking about are true, but we need to give them some breathing space. So let's do this.
Okay. Any other questions? Did you have something?
No, Scott and I have already chatted offline, and I encouraged him that, even if the economy took a cyclic downturn and we wound up with less hands-on type planning and permitting activities, that just opens up more bandwidth for us to do master planning work and those future things that we've got all queued up, and there's no hope of getting to them without increasing the staff.
Right. Well, that goes back, conversation a couple of months ago about looking at items that our committees and boards want work done on, and not necessarily saying stop, but that the timeline for completion, because, you know, Ryan's only got so much time that he's got to spend on our pet projects or the board's projects or whatever, that he's like, well, we've got, you know, Columbia underway, we've got 2 more that are coming to the planning commission in January pretty quick, and then another development after that, and that's just the industrial park. So then you throw in how, I mean, that's their focus, and so I definitely think that this covers a lot of help in that regard, so.
Yeah, and just a comment to follow up on Councilor Dale, I've been in a couple organizations that, you know, you shift where you need to, and so when development is hot, then that's what you do. And then when it slows down, everybody goes, oh, good, now we can get to we need to get to this document, we need to do some modifications, and you start trying to push those through as fast as you can. Then you wait for the next wave, and you go back to doing development. But it'd be nice if we had a little bit of a balance.
Totally. Great.
So you're just looking for nods? And
Yeah, at this point, yeah, I'd actually like formal approval to say proceed, then a procedural element, we do need to make some budget adjustments. We have a whole pile coming to you, just the normal things, and so we would just integrate that in there, but I would like a yes vote from the council to move forward with this.
Mr. Mayor?
There's a motion in here, right?
Yeah, there's a motion. I move to approve the addition of an associate planner position in the planning department.
So a motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Varway to approve the addition of an associate planner position in our planning department. Any other discussion or question for Mr. McClure? No? Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposing? No? There you go, Scott.
Yep, thank you very much. This is really helpful for staff. I think it's going to be good for the community, too.
I think so, too. Great, thank you. Next, City Administrator Business and Staff Reports. Looks like staff or presentation or conversation about report on boards, committee, commission appointment process from our last meeting.
Right. So the first time here, I'm actually going to turn it over to the city recorder, and she'll lead this discussion.
Great.
Okay, Mayor and Council, as you know, the city has 11 various boards, commissions, and committees, and the method of appointment, charge, and the length of service is all outlined in the municipal code, or charter, or by state statute. So recently there was discussion at the council about the appointment process, so I've included information in your packet about the process, so you can review that and let me know if you'd like to see any changes to that.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate that. I kind of maybe look to you, Councilor Parker, if there was comment based on information in the packet that's, again, going back to, you know, our last conversation.
Well, I think you and Scott have enough things piled up on your list. Why don't I work on this and come to you with a recommendation?
Okay, sure, I guess that could be, I'm not sure is there pieces that are jumping out that you're not I mean.
One question I had is whether we would have a more centralized and uniform process, and whether that's possible to do with what we've got. So,
Okay.
what my promise is to you is to come up with a review and recommendation on whether I see a way to improve this process.
Okay. Okay, so what's the heart of the issue, though, with the process? Please do.
I think what we've seen is that different committees have different appointment processes. Most recently, with the Heritage Landmark Commission, we found out that we did not have a process. That it was totally a legacy process where it was not written down. We had a practice of the chair meeting with people who were interested and then referring that on to the commission, which then was referred on to the council. I know, for example, that with the utility board, much more formal, as is the planning commission.
Yeah.
So maybe it is possible that each of these have their own organic processes that seem to work fine. My question is there anything to be gained by having something more uniform? Whether we should have the process run entirely out of the city recorders or have it decentralized with the chairs. So just a review of that. This is a program that I ran for 8 years with the county. True, we had a few more zeros in our budget than we've got here. But I just think we've run into one or two things along the way that it might be worthwhile to see if a more uniform sort of appointment process would be helpful. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the question of supplemental questions, that certain boards and commissions do have supplemental questions, some do not, and whether our current application that is online is a one-size-fits-all or doesn't really fit all. So those are the type of things that I'd like to take a look at.
Okay. Thoughts, comments from the rest of the council on it?
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to get at with that. I also understand that each of the different committees is headed up by a council liaison. And my opinion is that council liaison should be working with their committee or their commission in order to get that and put that together. And then, and I know the big piece of this puzzle right here stems from a planning commission appointee. And that's what brought this all up. But if you look at it, the group brought in a recommendation for a vote, and that policy was followed. So I don't know if a one-size-fits-all on the application does not work, but at the same time, the interview process is going to be different for the bike committee than it is for the planning commission. So I don't see a one-size-fits-all in that one either. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I've looked at the process, and they are very similar board to board. There's only a few that you're even involved in the interview process.
Yeah, like 3.
It's council liaison with the chair. Pretty much if you fog a mirror, you get in unless there's more than one applicant, and then we do an interview process. It's been that way for a while. I think the process works fine, but I do agree with Councilor Parker in that maybe there are a couple of boards, Planning Commission being one, where there's more of a quasi-judicial legislative type situation that maybe a supplemental questionnaire would go with the application. That might fit for some boards. And the second thing is I would agree that with said recommendation, the applications from other appointment candidates should probably be included in the packet so that the rest of the council knows a little bit more on the background, or maybe a summary of what the interview process was like. So we have a little bit more information about how that recommendation came about.
So I'm going to try to put this maybe together, put a bow on it a little bit, in that there are pieces that, based on what Councilor Parker was saying, that in terms of you've got Canby Utility Board, which is usually the board chair,
Right.
the manager, the liaison, and myself
Yeah.
usually do those interviews. Because it's Canby Utility and it's a separate entity, but still tied, dotted
To
line.
us in the charter.
Tied to us, right, in the charter. Then you've got the planning commission, again, being the quasi-judicial piece. Again, definitely weighted a lot more in terms of importance, in terms of what they do, and how their decisions carry the weight that they do. And then, I really think, am I leaving one off? That, I mean, budget committee, again, similar process, I think, in that.
Yeah, by practice, you're involved with the budget
Right.
committee. It's not a requirement.
You know, and I have no desire in being involved in every committee interview. That would be a lot, for sure. So it sounds like there's pieces that you were saying too that, okay, maybe that needs to be streamlined a little bit or looked at in terms of, are those other ones,
I think the
Outliers.
processes are good, but
you know, and sort of that, like, okay, are there supplemental questions? So like, and Melissa, to you, do you have a collection of questions for each board and committee? No. Okay, so it's really, those questions then kind of come from
the chair.
those chair, okay. So, and that might be where you're at, Counselor Parker, is what's, you know, are there similar vein of questions that can be asked for each committee, but then are there committee-specific questions?
And I would like us to overtly answer the question. Do we want a distributed system or do we want a centralized system?
Gotcha.
And secondly, Melissa, when we have applicants for a board or commission who are not appointed, what happens to that application?
We save those applications for a year, and so if a position becomes available, then we contact that person and see if they're still interested in serving.
For that particular board or
Right,
commission?
correct. Mhm.
And see, what we did at the county was that we put them into a pool, and that every time there was an opening on any board or commission, we sent an email to them. So again, that's more of a procedure than anything else, but it's the idea is if you have somebody who's interested in volunteering for one thing, and in fact, Brian, I think you mentioned this a couple of years ago, that somebody here would wanted to be on the budget committee, saying, well, maybe you don't want to be on the budget committee, but you'd like to be on one of these others.
Right.
So just some tweaks, you know, maybe I'm chasing a solution in search of a problem. I don't know.
Okay.
But I thought it's worth a question, and certainly the distributed versus centralized, that of how much do we want this out of one office, so it's consistent, and deadlines are hit and records are kept. I know, for example, with one of my committees, that there was a practice a few years ago where the chair would meet individually with applicants, and if he did not feel that they were qualified, he alone would come back and say, this person isn't qualified. So.
Yeah, I would say that, I've heard that as well, that, you know, Councilor Varga?
Well, I can testify that one size fits all does not always fit all. Sometimes I've thought it would fit me and it doesn't. One size fits most sometimes, but not all. And so I don't think that we can have a system that works for every single one of our boards exactly the same way. And so I think that we have to look at them all individually and say, how does this appointment process work? And maybe it's different from this one. I think that for most of them, the same process can work. Your liaison, your chairperson, your staff person. But when you get to stuff like planning commission, maybe that's when we say, okay, maybe we need to take this a little bit further and say planning commission appointments are interviewed by the council, or after, you know, suggestions are made to the council as a secondary. So I don't think that one process for every board is going to work.
So what if we do this? What if we do, Councilor Parker, if you come back to us, say for our first meeting in February, I don't know what the agenda is yet, but I don't know how loaded it's going to be, but we've got room. Maybe come back and like to us with, here are the pieces I want to look at, or think that so that we have something tangible to at least look at and noodle, and we may end up going like, what about, we may add to that context, and then therefore we have a better look at where it's at, and then move on to, okay, what would be next? Is that you and Melissa working together to get that figured out? Is that Melissa just going, okay, here's how this is going to work, y'all, and you guys have to deal with it? I mean, I'm even open to, you know, having Melissa be the one that says, here's the box for each piece, or the grand scheme of, like you said, centralizing it through her role, whatever. I mean, that might be fine as well, so, and that may just be the fix it, like we said, so.
And maybe there's no changes to be made, but
Maybe there's
it's been a while. I don't remember.
Never.
I don't remember us having taken a look at this, and especially with the Historic Landmark Commission, when we had a couple of vacancies, that the committee, one of the new committee members said, well, do we have a written process? And we realized we did not.
Yeah.
We had a practice
Sure.
that was followed, but if everybody left that committee the next day, we would have no collective memory of how to do that process.
Sure.
We have an assumption, which we're all sharing,
Right.
but the HLC finally did adopt a motion saying that it will be an interview with the chair and one member or the liaison, and then a recommendation back to the full committee, and then that forwarded on, which we kind of think happens now, but they formalized it.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have been doing this for 10 years now, and, yeah, Councilor Hensley and Councilor Dale were not far behind that. I mean, this has just kind of been the process, right? It was one of those, we adopted, we rolled into it, and just kind of been that way, right? So yeah, why don't we plan that for, an upcoming agenda here in February, bring back to us kind of thoughts on what we should look. Yeah.
Do you want this or this?
Yeah, so does that work for council in that regards? Cool, we'll do that. All right, good. Anything else on this one, y'all, before we move on? Okay, thank you guys, appreciate that. Next opportunity for citizen input. Not seeing any. Action review.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry, yes.
I actually had some other items besides.
Oh,
the
I'm
ones,
sorry.
so- Oh, it's fine.
It does say city administrator business and staff reports.
It's
I
confusing
apologize.
having an item in there, so it
Yeah.
threw you off, so. So just a couple of things, the splash pad, as you noticed, we had the boards up out in the lobby.
Yes.
That's gone really well. What's really been nice, the number, we actually have 110 surveys actually already filled out. We're just going to keep it going, through the first of the year. And what's been nice is actually to watch people. It's actually been very fun, because, people, families with young kids are saying, well, what do you want? And they go up there and they poke, and we've had older people that darn well don't have kids, or maybe grandkids. They're doing the same thing, and they're really looking at them real carefully, and we're getting a lot of good votes, and what we'd like. And then so ideas, we'll compile all that, and then our final step in the process is to then package up what we've asked is, which one seems to be the best one. We can swap out a couple components within budget. We're trying to still integrate, like I mentioned, a couple sidewalks that we need there, and maybe a gazebo, a couple benches, and then staff will package that all up together, and then get a contractor lined up, and we'll build a thing. So, but otherwise, it's gone really nicely. Interesting with that one, just from the experience, we would like to do that more often with other items. It's a nice traffic area, and then the other thing we're going to try to evolve too is just have informational items there. Police department could have just a little panel that has crime prevention tips. We could put in the "Don't dump this down your sewer, please." List and things like that. So it's a nice little information source, and it gives somebody just a little tidbit when they're coming through, just a little bit about what the city's doing. So we're going to keep pursuing that. Second one kind of relates to some of the process. We talk about permits. We had a really good meeting last week. Our permit process is a challenge. It works very well, but you have multiple entities. A lot of folks don't understand, but Clackamas County does the permits. Our planning department is involved. Canby Utility is involved, the fire district is involved, so there's a lot of routing, where things go, and so it's working well, but we're trying to tighten that up, make sure where we are in that. And then another thing that came up in discussion was we had a company come in recently that was using a chemical that had some concerns attached to it that no one knew about, and so it's like, okay, so two levels. One, we're going to try to kind of flag some items, so when the Clackamas County building inspectors, if they're in a building, they're there just for their code compliance. They're looking at what the issue is, but if they see like, that's an entire new something you have there, that might trigger, are you doing anything different with your process? And then, might check with us. And then another loop we're looking at is actually trying to change a little bit on our business license. So we're going to add a line that would have that same question. We just had an incident recently where we had a company that we didn't know about was using a chemical that is liquid when it left their facility, and then in the sewer pipe it solidifies. And eventually there would be no pipe. And so we flagged that when we got them taken care of. But same thing, we need to talk to those folks, when they come in. So we're going to try to get a couple plugs on that. Walnut Street, couple items. The TSP amendment that we need to work on. They identified a lot of improvements to basically the entire industrial park, looking at down the main connection and then potentially the interesting one that came out of it. There's more details, but if you funnel all the traffic to Walnut and First Street, then you fail that intersection. So
Right.
the fact that you're rerouting everything to a funnel point, essentially, that causes a problem. So then potentially we have a roundabout there. So that's another discussion point. So we're trying to, sort through some things there. And then just likewise, though, we've got Kern McLeod working on, we're going to go back to the 4 pre-qualified engineering firms that we have, can include some of these discussions and then get going on the route so we can get a good cost estimate. And one thing we're going to do so we get a better picture on the front end is also do a layer we can do more informally on the utilities, because people talk about, the road's going to cost X. Roads aren't just roads.
Right.
There's also utilities attached. So we want to know what we're actually kind of getting into on the front end, then we can have those conversations with the property owners. But so we're making some progress. I think taking a little more comprehensive approach. I think it'll play out better in the future on that one. So then last one, we did mention this development activity right next to Columbia. Trammell Crow is going to do 3 spec buildings. So that's really a different level of confidence. People do not build spec buildings unless you think you can fill them. And so that's another vote of confidence in our economy here.
Well, I think it's a vote of confidence in the economy, but I also think it's a vote of confidence in Canby. I know when talking with Trammell Crow about the Columbia project, they generally don't pop buildings on a spec level unless they've got pretty well confirmed partnerships involved in those. So that's exciting to hear. That'll be, that was their goal with the whole Columbia project, was what comes after that. So that's great to hear that they're still committed to investing in Canby.
Yep. So thank you, and that is it, unless you have any questions.
Anything new on the stoplight on Fred Meyer?
Anything new?
Any update on
Oh, no, it's just
timeframe?
in process. So yeah, then what they're going to do is actually in January, they'll sit down and have a pre-con meeting, and then at that point, we'll get everything laid out timing-wise.
With holiday traffic, I've been hearing more people saying, when's that stoplight going to
Oh,
come?
okay.
Won't be there for Christmas.
Yeah,
Not this Christmas.
yeah, not this time. And then we're also looking at the addition of like lasers, so we can do light shows and sequence music with it, so, yeah.
That'll see if Canby knows it.
In 1 hour, we'll see it.
We changed the lights from red to green based on town songs, different
Yeah, right.
songs.
It was like,
We take like Trans-Siberian Orchestra Christmas song, then signal up the lights. Pretty good. All right. I apologize for cutting you off there, Scott, but is there anything else? You're good? Okay, great. So we did citizen input already, but I'll go back now that there's anything new. All right. Melissa?
Okay, you have reviewed the minutes or approved the minutes of 12-4, approved the appointment of Mr. Hutchinson to the Planning Commission, approved resolution number 1329, and approved the addition of an associate planner to the Planning Department.
Great, thank you. Before I take a motion to adjourn, I just want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and safe holidays. And if you're traveling, please be careful, travel safely, and have a great holiday season, all of you as well. Merry Christmas, all of you. Enjoy it. I know you've got family in town and everyone's traveling, so be careful. So I will take a motion to adjourn. It's already moved, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Good night, Canby, and Merry Christmas.